Welcome to another edition of the Aud Pod, a podcast of the Office of the Washington State Auditor. The State Auditor's Office, or SAO for short, works on behalf of the public to promote accountability and transparency in government. You can learn more at sao.wa.gov. In today's podcast, Lean Specialist Joanna Bailey from SAO's Center for Government Innovation talks with David Cullen, Human Resources Director for South County Fire Authority in Everett, Washington. Joanna facilitated a free Lean workshop for David and several Authority employees to help them improve their work processes, and David joined us to discuss his experience.
Okay, so David, what prompted you to seek Lean services from the Center for Government Innovation?
It's essentially the desire to create a movement of sorts in my agency related to Lean methodology, having used it at a couple other organizations in the private not-for-profit sector and seen how powerful it was.
And what kind of value did you find in having an external facilitator? Because I know you do have a background in Lean.
I think it was valuable in a couple of different ways. It lended some credibility to the folks in my organization who weren't as familiar and were perhaps predisposed to think that this really wasn't valid or important. And it enabled me to kind of put on different hats. I could just be sort of leader, sponsor, or somebody who could jump in almost like a subject matter expert at points and offer information or ask questions. So it gave me the opportunity to kind of get something different out of the experience.
And I know you had said you were hoping to start a movement within your agency. Had there been attempts to try incorporating Lean before into the agency?
Not to my knowledge, and what I do know is that it's highly unlikely anyone ever attempted anything like this at all.
Okay, so what made you think that now was the right time to try again?
That I just all organizations have, elements of waste. It's sort of impossible to avoid, but we were so replete with it, particularly in HR and finance, that it seemed so easy to address if I could just get people to trust in a sort of process.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you share a few details about the Lean Improvement event itself? Maybe speaking to how the event was structured, what happened, how long did it take, and what types of activities were involved for your team?
Well, we spent two consecutive days, about 6 hours each day, and we had a collection of folks from operations, from HR, from finance, and from public records, some of whom were operators, some of whom were leaders in those areas. And we're looking at what we call the HR actions, changes in people's HR records that would have an impact on payroll. That was the sort of process that we were attempting to look at. And we will run through a lot of different processes where we would just identify waste generally in an academic sense, try to do some mapping, look at potential solutions or fixes or ideas, and then vote on those ideas to see what will we even attempt to do and what it might accomplish.
Okay, and what are a few key things you learned as a result of your Lean experience?
Well, it was interesting. I didn't necessarily learn much, which sounds obnoxious. But, I was familiar enough with process, tools, methodology. That's why I wanted us to try it. I think what I learned was something about the minds of the folks that I work with, which is to say, I was afraid that they would not truly be open to the tools and would seize upon the steps that they are doing in their work as sacrosanct. And I was wrong. They were more prepared to dig into these new tools and to kind of, try on this methodology, and were way more elastic in their thinking about what was possible, what we could accomplish here. And particularly on the quote finance side, the people in HR, work for me. And the people in finance are the ones who seemingly or more attached to all the different parts of the process that we had constructed over time, or at least drifted into. And so I was really afraid that they would hang on. And everybody was open-minded and really thinking about what might we do that could be better.
That's fantastic. Can you describe any surprises or revelations you experienced during or as a result of your lean experience?
Well, frankly, it was it was the facilitator, and it was because there was an even higher than what I think of as my 30,000-foot level. I was looking at this a little bit from the outside because I'm not an operator in this process. I'm just a leader, and um, and yet I was really focused just on what are our starting and end points. Everything else is quote out of scope. So let's not waste time and energy on anything that's beyond the work we've set before ourselves. And yet you were able to look at it almost like an auditor, though I know your role wasn't as an auditor during your time with us, but instead to just look at sort of best practices when it comes to what should we be doing as an organization when it comes to the things we do that affect payroll and the ways that we process payroll from a compliance perspective. And you had insights and suggestions that have actually come into play subsequent to this work, even though it was essentially out of scope. And that was a great surprise and really helpful.
I'm really glad to hear that, David. So can you please describe a quantitative and or qualitative improvement in your work process as a result of the lean experience?
Well, we've been able to reduce a great number of steps on the HR side of the process. And as this work flows, it starts with a request in operations to make some sort of change. And we do quite a number of them because of the complexity of our contract. And what we were doing was HR was doing a lot of work that I had historically thought of as kind of finance or payroll related, and found that that work was then being duplicated in finance. And what we were doing is taking information from an email, putting it into a system like an HR information system, then also putting that information into two different spreadsheets that were touched by a number of different people in operations and HR in finance. And we were able to basically get rid of one of those spreadsheets, remove one of the operators from operations, and reduce the number of steps that the HR folks and operations folks were doing by 40 or so. It's a little bit difficult to count all these steps accurately, but it's been a great reduction. More than half, probably more like 60% of the steps that were being done in the previous process by operations and HR to effect one of these changes, about 60% of those were removed because they were sort of forms of redundancy and overprocessing where folks were cutting and pasting from spreadsheet to spreadsheet and from system to spreadsheet and back and forth. We haven't really changed in terms of the number of steps, the work done by our finance colleagues, though they are doing different work as a result. It isn't more work. So their experience is roughly the same in terms of steps and time. Whereas for the rest of the people in this process, it's frankly night and day. There are fewer people involved and it takes a great deal less time.
That's fantastic, David. One thing I want to follow up with, can you speak to the value? I heard you say that you removed one of the people involved in this process. Can you speak to the value of what that change of task assignment has for that person? What are they more able to do now because they're not involved with this process?
I'll be honest, I don't really know, except insofar as it really wasn't this person's job the way it's designed to do the kind of work that she was doing. And she wasn't set up with the right tools to do it, meaning that she would take some of the information from an email, not having access to the HR information system, and begin a process in a spreadsheet that would then have to be corrected almost invariably every time to at least some degree. So that person has been freed up to do her quote real job, which is more on the order of supporting people directly in operations around our scheduling and rostering of firefighters and emergency responders. So she's able to get to the things that are really, truly important and value added related to making sure we have the right people in the right places on the fire line.
Great. Thank you, David. What advice would you give to other leaders to help their team get started using Lean?
I'd say call up the Washington State Auditor's Office and ask for help, given that it's as good a Lean product as I've experienced in two different very, very experienced organizations in the Northwest, and it was free.
That's great. That's great. Okay. How has your Lean experience impacted your approach to managing change?
I don't know that it has. It simply emboldened me in my current job at this organization to say, we can do this, and have already touted it a bit with the Board of Commissioners. My organization is governed by elected officials, and I've let them know about this work. I have yet to report out, and I'm going to wait until kind of 90 days to see how much we've been able to sustain, and give them what I believe will be really good news about the sorts of things we've talked about in this discussion.
That's great. Is there anything else that stands out to you about your experience that you'd like to share?
No, just that I think it's a wonderful service, that it's really great that the state is able to do this, and I hope it continues. And it's funny to me that usually we're afraid of auditors, and that this comes out of the Washington State Auditor's Office is great and ironic to my sensibilities.
Okay. Thank you, David.
That concludes this episode of the Aud Pod. Thank you for your attention and interest in good government. If you have any questions about SAO's work on behalf of Washingtonians, you may visit our website at sao.wa.gov.